On the last episode of the Keepsake box. Londa, I want to apologize for the way things happened. I was in a messed up place in my marriage and an even more messed up place in my mind. I was doing a lot of drugs and that didn't help the situation. I suspected that Ron was crossing the line and I failed to protect you. I didn't want to think it was true. But when I found out you were pregnant, I knew. And something broke inside of me. I was so broken. It was easy for me to blame you. I didn't want to see Ron as that person. But now I'm forced to understand exactly who he is, who he's been all along. My baby. He touched my baby. I found it hard to comprehend the words that had been spoken. Ron wasn't a good man, a fact that was evidenced by the history that Sharon and I shared with him. And even though I tried to recognize the signs with Cassidy, I wanted to believe that Ron could exercise enough restraint to avoid touching her. A large part of me was proud of Cassidy. Even with the limitation of her abilities, she had managed to stand up for herself enough to make sure that Ron paid for what he had done to all of us. As a woman with a fully functioning mind, I had found it difficult to do that. I addressed Mom in an attempt to calm her. I'm glad Cassidy told you. At least you understand who he is now. Mom didn't speak. I called her name, believing that the call had been dropped. Mom, are you there? I thought that I was shocked by the initial revelation. I couldn't have foreseen that the additions to the story would be even more troubling. Mom spoke, and I hadn't ever been able to forget her voice as she said the words. Shelonda, Cassidy didn't tell me that Ron was touching her. Mom told me that 2 days prior, she had left work early as she wasn't feeling well. Upon entering the house, she'd heard Cassidy screaming. Accustomed to Cassidy's tantrums, Mom approached her bedroom, prepared to tell her to keep it down. But when she opened the bedroom door, she found that Ron was forcibly raping Cassidy on the bed. I started seeing red as I replayed the scenario in my mind. I remembered how I felt when Ron used to rape me. That was one of the darkest times in my life, and even being so, I was 16 when things were at their worst. While I was too young to have dealt with where life had taken me, I was strong. I was of sound mind, and I was able to play the game with Ron. But Cassidy was different. Not only did Cassidy lack an understanding, but she was pure. I thought about Ron violating her, and it brought tears to my eyes. Knowing Mom, Cassidy still had cartoon sheets and curtains. How, as a grown man, do you reconcile being aroused by someone who sleeps on Powerpuff Girls sheets? It was incomprehensible. I hated Ron more than I ever thought I could hate anyone. And trust me, I had plenty of hate in my heart. How dare he take something so innocent and taint it forever? How dare he hurt her in a way that would change her entire outlook on the world? How dare he make her afraid in the one place that should have provided comfort for her? How dare he? Somehow, it felt different than when he had done it to me. I wasn't his biological child. That didn't make it okay, but you'd think that he'd feel more protective of his own flesh and blood. But then again, I couldn't forget that he had done it to Sharon as well. She was biologically related to Ron, and he still hadn't cared enough to avoid hurting her. Why did I assume that he wouldn't hurt Cassidy? Everyone failed. Sharon's mother failed her. Mom failed me. And when it came down to it, I shouldn't have ever trusted Mom to protect Cassidy. I failed her. Chapter 10, Unmet Obligations Part 2. Narrated by Shandora Warren. Music by Epidemic Sound. The whole thing angered and saddened me. And as a result, a part of me reconnected with the love that I had for Mom. We were attached in the way that some Siamese twins are connected, by a small sliver of skin. Cassidy was that sliver of skin. Mom and I had connected as a result of our joint hurt over Cassidy's predicament. And even though Mom had done something that was extremely hurtful to me, I was happy that she had done right by Cassidy. That's what mattered to me. By that point in time, I was far removed from much of the hurt associated with our relationship, or lack thereof. But just as I was falling into my cycle of undeserved forgiveness, Mom helped me to put my feelings back into perspective. She interrupted my thoughts. Londa, I need you to do something for me. I know it's a lot to ask, but I need you. I can't deal with all of this right now. I need you to take Cassidy for a while. I'm stressed out and I don't want to turn back to drugs. Plus, with Ron being gone, I can't really afford to take care of her on my own. I heard you're doing quite well. I think you're in a much better position to take care of it than I am. I immediately jumped out of affection mode. While I had initially been sucked in by Mom's display of emotion, I was suddenly faced with the realization that Mom was participating in her usual antics. I was simultaneously hurt and angry. One thing that I was very much aware of was Mom's work ethic. She was a subpar mother at best, but I never doubted her ability to financially provide for Cassidy. Additionally, Ron hadn't ever contributed much to the household's finances. Those factors taken into account, I couldn't help but to arrive at an inevitable conclusion. Mom was more than capable of taking care of Cassidy. Her request had alerted me to the fact that she had no desire to do so. Remembering things about our joint history, I realized something about Mom. Ron's love was her primary objective. I went back to when I found out that Mom was pregnant with Cassidy. I remember the pride that she had in giving Ron a legitimate child of his own. I remembered how she adored Cassidy in the hospital before we realized that she was developmentally delayed. I remembered Mom's inability to protect me, but even more impactful was why. Mom had failed to protect me because she had more of a vested interest in keeping her relationship with Ron intact. That was the hardcore truth. A lot of things came into perspective. Mom was asking me to take Cassidy because she had outgrown her need for her. Cassidy was no longer the tie that bound Mom and Ron together. She was damaged goods. As far as Mom was concerned, Cassidy was representative of Ron's indiscretions. Cassidy was a carbon copy of Ron. Everyone always talked about how much she resembled him. Knowing Mom, I couldn't imagine that she could look at Cassidy and not draw a mental reference to him. I wanted to be wrong, but I knew I wasn't. That's who Mom was, and that's how she operated. I was suddenly very angry and overcome with emotion. I addressed Mom in a way that I hadn't ever imagined that I would. I was always very respectful to her, even when I had no justifiable reason to be. But on that day, I found it impossible to quell my desire to tell Mom exactly what was on my mind. I listened to her logic, and then I delivered a response that she should have received years prior. Mom, I listened to everything that you've said, and I have a personal connection to what happened to Cassidy. How could I not? I dealt with Ron's abuse for years. The one thing that stopped me from coming forward was the realization that I would likely not be believed. I knew that I would be made to feel that my abuse was the result of me being too grown or doing too much. Do you understand how hard it was to realize that I blamed myself for what happened, and you knew the whole time? Do you realize how hard it was to watch you, the one person who had an obligation to believe me, tell me that you wished death upon me and everything that was connected to me? Do you know how hard it was for me to abort my baby, knowing that I could have avoided that heartache if you had done right by me as a mother? Of course you don't know, because you haven't ever thought past what was convenient for you. So no, I will not take Cassidy. I absolutely feel that I can love her more than you can ever have the ability to, but I will not give you the benefit of being able to dismiss her for your convenience. Cassidy doesn't have the ability to understand who you are, a fact that I am grateful for. I'm glad that she doesn't understand that she has been a pawn in your pathetic game. But there's one thing that I'm aware of. You will make sure that she has what she needs and wants. And since she doesn't have the capacity to express the need for anything on an emotional level, I'm completely comfortable with the fact that she will be okay with you. Since Ron has been taken out of the equation, of course. I didn't know what to expect from Mom, as I hadn't ever challenged her. But her rebuttal made me understand that I had an adequate interpretation of who I was dealing with, as much as I wanted to be wrong. Mom addressed me. Londa, you sure this is a position you want to take on this? Think back to your grandma. She'd want you to do the right thing. I thought back to Grandma. She would, indeed, want me to do the right thing. Grandma wouldn't have turned either of us away, regardless of the situation. But having Mom play the grandma card infuriated me, and I couldn't resist the urge to tell her so. I lashed out at Mom. Mom, you have some nerve. How dare you bring Grandma into this? The Lord should strike you down for even mentioning her name. But before I could really dig into her, Mom opened a box containing the answers that I had been seeking for the entirety of my life. She also made me aware that my thinking had been completely on base. She confirms everything that I felt was true. Mom paused, then addressed me. You want to play this game, Londa? Well, let's go. For as smart as you think you are, there's some things that you really don't know. In telling them, I understand they're going to hurt you, but you asked for it. I know you think I don't understand how you feel, but nothing could be further from the truth. I was molested by an older family friend. That's how I got pregnant with you. And no one believed me. I wanted to have an abortion, but your grandma talked me out of it. She told me that she would take over as your primary caretaker if I decided against the abortion. But after your birth, she failed to uphold her end of the bargain. She insisted that I be a full-time mother to you. She let me down, and I haven't ever forgiven her for that. She created a set of circumstances that forced me to look at you every day, the result of something that was so hurtful. I hated men after that point. I went years without the desire to date. And then came Ron. I fell in love with him after all the ill feelings that I had towards men. I wanted to leave you with your grandma, but Ron insisted that I bring you along. Look how that turned out for me. You destroyed everything, and now this. Cassidy gives me the same feelings that I had when I was forced to keep you. I know that ain't right, but that's how I feel. I don't want to be her mother. I've never wanted to be anyone's mother. Your grandma forced me to be a mother to you, and Ron forced me to be a mother to Cassidy. But given the situation, I don't think he's in a position to require such anymore. Yes, I can provide for her, but I don't think I can love her in the way that I should. She's a piece of Ron, and I hate that. So I have to present you with an ultimatum, because it's the only card that I have left to play. I know how you feel about your sister. I've allowed you to have a relationship with her because the situation between you and Ron wasn't entirely your fault. But if you decide not to take primary custody of Cassidy, understand that things will change. If you decide not to take her, you will not have access to her. I will put her in a home and make sure that you will not be allowed to visit her without my approval. Let me tell you now that I will not grant you permission. I thought long and hard about my options. I loved Cassidy, and I certainly felt that she would be better off with me than in any institution. But the more I thought about it, I really wasn't in a position to be a primary caretaker for Cassidy. My life was all over the place, and I couldn't ensure that I was going to be in the right places at the right times. I didn't have a life that was conducive to being a parent to a 10-year-old. I know it sounds bad to say, but it just wasn't convenient for me. That's unfortunate, but those are my thoughts at the time. I asked to speak to Cassidy. Surprisingly, Mom allowed me to do so. I told Cassidy that I loved her, and I promised that I would always be there for her if I understood that she needed me. I told Mom that she had to do what she had to do. I didn't want Cassidy to go into the system, but I refused to pause my life so Mom could be free. She didn't deserve to be free. She deserved to live with the hardship of reflection. She deserved to see Cassidy every day, knowing that she was the product of the relationship that caused her to betray me and Grandma. She deserved it all. I hung up with Mom that day with the fear that she was going to put Cassidy into an institution. I didn't think I would ever hear from either of them again. I knew I owed it to Cassidy to do better, but I didn't. I did what was best for me at the expense of Cassidy's well-being. I went out of my way to spite Mom, also at the expense of Cassidy's well-being. I felt awful, and I cried the day away. I walked away from Cassidy, saddened over all of my unmet obligations. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow Shenny Tells a Story on Facebook and Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in purchasing books by Shandora Warren, they're all available on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and some in hardback formats. Thank you for helping me to create the world that I want to see. Oh yeah, you're welcome. Shine, little girl.